So, good morning, everyone here in the auditorium, and also everyone zooming in from wherever you are. In the interest of time, we're going to start right away. Just very quickly about logistics today or this session. We'll give 20 minutes for each presentation, followed by designated discussion who has about 10 minutes. And then we'll ask the speakers to respond to the questions raised by the discussant. And then if we have time, we'll open up the floor and get feedback and comments, questions from the floor. So that's the plan for this morning. And let me now introduce our first speaker, Dr. Sooa McCormick. She is Korea Foundation Curator of Korean Art at the Cleveland Museum of Art since she joined there in 2015. She has a PhD degree from University of Kansas and master's degree from the Rutgers University. Her curatorial projects include Gold Needles Korean Embroidery Arts, 2020, 책거리, Pleasure of Possessions in Korean Painted Screens, 2017, and Arts of Festivity, 2016. Moving ahead, she is organizing 3 wonderful exhibitions, Hiking into the Seven Jewel Mountain, to be open in 2024, Persistence and Subversion in Korean Couture, 2024, and then in 2026, 10 Kings of Hell and the Beyond from Medieval Korea. All sound so wonderful, and I'd love to be there. While pursuing her curatorial career, Dr. McCormick remains active as a researcher and investigates the intersection between ecology, politics, and economy in early modern East Asian art. So, warm welcome to Dr. McCormick.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for a wonderful introduction, and I'm so honored to be part of this important symposium. I'm going to begin my presentation. Umberto Eco once said, "I speak through cloth." This statement illustrates fashion as a highly sociable expression of individuality. Due to such characteristics, sumptuary laws across the globe have been applied to fashion and textile arts far more than any other artistic media. In the case of Korea, royal edicts issued by King Aejang and Heungdeok are among the earliest sumptuary laws. They restricted the use of gold and silverwares and certain types of fashion items only to limited levels of ruling elites. These examples evince that already in ancient Korean politics, sumptuary laws were deployed not only to kingly authority, but also control the subject. This talk today will examine 18th century Korea's various societal components shaped under the rulership of 2 Korean monarchs, King Yeongjo and Jeongjo, and explored what signature they implanted in their sumptuary laws. And further, I will examine in what way 18th century sumptuary laws and their gender-based discriminatory viewpoints affected the material and visual language of late Joseon period textile arts. Scholars strove to differentiate the political nature of 18th century sumptuary laws from those implemented earlier. In their discussion, 18th century laws were viewed as a part of statecraft to reinforce Confucian ideas of frugality in response to rapid urbanization, the overflow of luxury goods, and the rise of middle class as major consumers. In 1733, King Yeongjo banned the production of patterned silk and gold threads at the royal office attire, Sangwon. In 1757, he further applied such a provision to privately owned looms and workshops. The image on the left shows mid-Joseon period a women's jacket that has intricate patterns and also woven with gold threads. And the one on the right is a mid-18th century Korean men's official robe, 단령, that when you look at the detail, the one on the left has shown that golden thread was used. So you can see what kind of materials were used in each cases. Well, the cloud pattern as you see in the example to the right, was allowed to be used only for ceremonial robes such as 단령, while the rest of the patterns were all officially forbade. Therefore, large number of robes are made of patterned silk and woven gold thread, such as this beautiful ceremonial skirt worn by Lady Han, or the ceremonial jacket worn by Lady Gwon, are mostly excavated from tombs dated to before Yeongjo and Jeongjo's reigning years. According to textile art historian Lee Min-ju, imported silk from China became highly sought after luxury items among ruling elites as well as Jungin class members. And they made a tremendous impact on late Joseon women's fashion. Lee Soo-hyun points out that Yeongjo and Jeongjo's enactment of sumptuary laws ending up discouraging the domestic production of high-quality patterned silk, yet simultaneously resulted in increasing the importation of patterned silk from China. In fact, many examples of excavated luxury fashion works are often mentioned as an evidence to point out the paradox of 18th century sumptuary laws. As navigating this paradox, I'd like us to ponder upon one simple question. Did strict sumptuary laws in 18th century simply aim to reinforce Neo-Confucian frugal lifestyle because luxurious commodities were overflown to prosperous 18th century Korea? In the past 20 years, many scholars re-examined economic and environmental conditions of late Joseon period from interdisciplinary perspectives and convincingly challenged a few existing assumptions deeply embedded in the study of 18th century Korea. Kim Deok-jin and Kim Moon-gi, for example, challenges that such a prevailing assumption by bringing into the environmental perspective of the Little Ice Age. Their research provides extremely important alternative reading of this much studied yet much misunderstood era. They both treat the Great Famine of Gyeongshin that started in 1670 and lasted to 1671, and the Great Famine of Eulbyung that also lasted from 1695 to 1699 as a pivotal event to counter our conventional understanding of 18th century Korea. An abundant number of records regarding catastrophic climate patterns, subsequent epidemics, and famine are well archived in the veritable record of Joseon Dynasty, Joseon Wangjo-shillok, and writings by many intellectuals. For instance, the veritable records note King Sukjong requested 500,000 sack of grain from Qing Emperor Kangxi at the time of Eulbyung famine that occurred at the turn of the 18th century. And writings by many individuals who struggled through the age of famine and natural disasters, for example, 송파집 by Lee Soo-woo, include a number of incidents and his poems referring to great famines of Eulbyung. Such historical records prove that Yeongjo's reigning years, started in 1724, could not immediately rescue the devastated kingdom from its immediate past of famines and epidemic crises. Characterizing the 18th century as a time of prosperity seems to be too simplistic because that period was free from foreign invasions or enjoyed a two strong monarchs' successful leadership. Rather than considering a complex ecosystem of 18th century Korean visual and material culture, greatly restrained by sumptuary laws, current art historical discourse continued to reiterate the notion of prosperous and affluent Yeongjo and Jeongjo's reigning years, still strive to interpret overarching Neo-Confucian aesthetic that we can see in these two moon jars in such a context. While a few studies examine the sumptuary laws of Yangzhou and Zhengzhou era and its relationship with visual culture, Erin Cho and Kang Jang-ho's research in 2014 is noteworthy. Cho and Kang proposed that late Joseon period sumptuary laws intensified restriction on materials used for art design and consequently formulated unique late Joseon aesthetics. My research article also argues that so-called aesthetics of restraint and austerity were not simply manifestation of Joseon period Neo-Confucian values, nor inherent to Korean cultural DNA, but rather a product of complex network of political and economic and environmental condition of 18th century Korea. I propose to call the overarching aesthetic of 18th century Korean arts the aesthetic of sustainability. In recent decades, many scholars have discussed by the mid-17th century, patriarchal attitudes were built in to historical narrative of Korean visual culture. Many of them has focused on how the narrative of early 16th century woman artist Shin Sa-im-dang and her body of works became distorted through the dominant male gaze. Lee Soo-gin and Yoo Jung-eun convincingly demonstrate Song Si-yeol and his followers in mid and late 17th century purposefully underrated Shin's wide spectrum artistic identity, frame her as a painter of birds and flowers, an ideal subject of domesticated elite women. The sumptuary laws enacted by King Yangzhou and Zhengzhou, in fact, reflect such an intensified atmosphere of gender discrimination. In 1756, Yangzhou prohibited a woman's hair extension, gache, and recommended women to wear a decorative headpiece instead, chokduri. In 1788, Cheongju reissued a royal decree titled 가채 신금 3호 to ban women wearing of elaborate long wig. Cheongju's decree was published in both literary Chinese and Hangul to promote the broad readership among women of various degrees of education and social classes. King Jeongjo's statement included in the royal decree here clearly reveals this view about women, his view about women and their fashion. Quote, "Do not say the women's clothing is unrelated to politics. And from now on, we must move on from extravagance to frugality, from barbarity to civilization," end quote. These remarks reveal that Cheongju perceived the government's regulation of women's fashion to be inseparable from his political vision, particularly his concern to make Joseon as a center of Confucian civilization, often termed as Junghwa or Sojunghwa. Lee Dong-mu, a male intellectual who lived in the same time as King Jeongjo, shares a similar sentiment on women and their fashion. The excerpt from the 청정관 전서, which reads as the following, highlights the dominant male gaze. Quote, "I heard from the elders that in old days, women's clothes were made of ample fabric." But then he noticed the differences. And how now things have changed, how frivolous these days clothing is. Most of these clothes people call trendy all come from courtesans. Men are now seduced by them and blinded to their frivolousness to the point of encouraging their wives and concubines to learn and emulate courtesans' style. End quote. Comparing excavated women's jacket dating to different periods, as shown in this slide, verified Lee's observation. Lady Kwon's jacket of the early 18th century is 45 centimeter long, and Princess Cheonghyun Gunju's jacket dated to the late 18th century is 25 centimeter long. Also, as you can see here, the shape of women's ceremonial jacket, 당의, became much slimmer and tighter compared to examples dated to earlier centuries. The one on the left going to be shown in the next year exhibition that I curate. As gleamed through Lee's observation, male intellectuals who lived through the age of strict sumptuary laws perceived women to be the source of moral corruption, leading innocent men to disobey Confucian moral standards. Such a view explains why King Jeongjo associated women and their code of fashion with politics. Even women at the time was not allowed to participate in politics. Women are physically confined to domestic space, gyubang, but their potential to corrupt Joseon society was perceived so great to the point of jeopardizing the sage king's vision to transform the Joseon kingdom into center of Confucian civilization. A few recent studies point out as a fashion so-called 상박하후, literally meaning scant top and abundant bottom, developed in the late Joseon period as a visual token to women's expressive self-awareness about their feminine sexuality. Fashion historians Jang In-woo relate such a trend with heavily gender discriminatory structure of the late Joseon society. Jang argues that in early and mid-Joseon period, men and women's fashion design was quite gender neutral. Other textile scholars Jeong Ju-ran and Kim Yong-mun also supported his argument, pointing out early Joseon period clothing for both genders aimed for unconstructed loose fit. Men's overcoat and women's ceremonial robes dated to early and mid-Joseon period share many design elements in common. Men's government uniform called 달령, shown to our right, exemplified early Joseon period gender-neutral fashion. An example excavated from the tomb of Lady Yi showcases that in mid-Joseon period, 달령 was worn by women as a wedding gown. Furthermore, women's 달령-style wedding gown dated to early and mid-Joseon period even carried the rank badges, as highlighted in these two examples. Ceremonial jacket called 당의 and a long overcoat 장의 or 장옷 were initially worn by both men and women. However, 당의 became exclusively worn by women as its design became increasingly slimmer and tighter over time. And 장의 or 장옷, a long overcoat with no side slit, was also worn by both genders, but it became women's sole type of overcoat. Kim So-hee suggests that the style of scant top and abundant bottom should be seen as an expression of late Joseon period women's desires to liberate their sexual desire and lifestyle, much suppressed within Joseon patriarchal society. Kim's observation is valuable in terms of giving Joseon women a voice to advocate their own sexual and physical identities. However, we also must recognize that late Joseon period women's fashion was not only an empowered product of women's self-perceptions, but also extremely vulnerable one that constantly intervened and imposed by the dominant male gaze, which aimed to continuously exercising, othering women or objectifying women. Many scholars question if late Joseon period sumptuary laws were ever effective. Such a skepticism seems to be justified by an array of luxurious goods buried in many elite tombs, such as blue and white porcelain epitaph tablets and luxurious fashion works made of expensive imported silk. Interestingly, most of the excavated burial items we often associate with late Joseon era are mainly dated to mid and late 17th century and early 18th century, not at all to Yeongjo and Jeongjo's reigning years. In truth, there are very few luxurious excavated clothing could be securely dated to mid and late 18th century, a period when Yeongjo and Jeongjo's sumptuary laws became effective. This woman's jacket, for example, is one of the very few excavated garments dating back to Yeongjo and Jeongjo's time. As you can see here, also there are many patchworks are done on this short jacket. I believe the sumptuary laws of Yangzhou and Zhengzhou era could be seen as effective to a certain degree if we are willing to allow ourselves to ask questions that require more nuanced readings. For example, could embroidery practice, which became increasingly popular in late 18th and the 19th century, be understood as artistic practice to embrace strict sumptuary laws that ban the production and consumption of intricate pattern silk? How about relating the popularity of 조각보 patchwork, a practice known for recycling scraps, with the aftermath of sumptuary laws? Can we associate this royal gown that used the recycled paper as a liner with the strict implementation of sumptuary laws that even acquired royal families that should follow? Or could we discuss the full cycle of patchwork in this colorful gown worn by many generations of women for their wedding day, and define it an excellent example to demonstrate how 18th century sumptuary laws were persisted yet creatively subverted at the same time? Thank you very much.